I clutched the phone, my fingers trembling as I replayed the voicemail for the third time. Marley's voice, usually so full of life, was tinged with panic. "Aunt Eileen, please help me. Rick, he's—" A sharp scream cut her off, followed by the unmistakable sound of a struggle. Then silence. I sank into the worn armchair, my mind racing. Marley, my bright-eyed, fearless niece, was in trouble. The ominous message had come from Rick's house, where she was staying while attending the university in the city. Something was very wrong. I glanced over at my father, dozing peacefully in front of the TV. At 68 years old, he relied on me more and more these days, and I couldn't bear the thought of leaving him alone. But Marley needed me. I had to go. Grabbing my car keys, I hurried out the door, my heart pounding. The drive to the city felt endless, each mile filled with dread. What had happened to Marley? Was she hurt? Scared? I couldn't bear the thought of her being in danger. As I neared Rick's neighborhood, my stomach churned. I'd always sensed something off about my brother-in-law, even before my sister's untimely death 3 years ago. His detached demeanor and controlling behavior had always rubbed me the wrong way, but I'd never imagined he could be capable of harming Marley. Pulling into the driveway, I rushed to the front door, pounding frantically. "Marley? Rick? Are you there?" Silence. I tried the handle, locked. A sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. Something was very, very wrong. I rushed around to the side of the house, peering through the windows. The living room was dark, but I could see Marley's bedroom light on upstairs. Without hesitation, I grabbed a rock and shattered the glass of the kitchen window, wincing at the loud crash. I climbed inside, my heart racing as I made my way up the stairs. "Marley?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Marley, are you here?" I pushed open the bedroom door, and my breath caught in my throat. The room was in disarray, the bedding tossed aside, a lamp smashed on the floor, but Marley was nowhere to be seen. "Marley!" I shouted, panic rising in my chest. I searched the other rooms, my mind spinning with horrific possibilities. Where was she? What had happened? As I stood in the hallway, unsure of my next move, a floorboard creaked behind me. I whirled around to see Rick emerge from the shadows, his face twisted in an unsettling grin. "Looking for someone, Eileen?" I recoiled, my hands clenching into fists. "What have you done with Marley?" Rick chuckled, the sound sending a chill down my spine. Now, Eileen. I'm sure dear Marley is just fine, although I can't say the same for you." Before I could react, he lunged forward, his hands closing around my throat. I gasped, clawing at his grip as the world around me spun. Panic surged through me, but I refused to give in, to let Marley down. With a burst of adrenaline, I drove my knee into his groin, and he released his hold, doubling over in pain. I stumbled backwards, my lungs burning, and fled down the stairs, my only thought to get help and find Marley. As I raced to my car, one terrifying question echoed in my mind. What had I unleashed? My heart pounded as I peeled out of Rick's driveway, tires squealing. I had to get help. I had to find Marley. The image of Rick's twisted grin and the feel of his hands around my throat played over and over in my mind. What was he capable of? I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to steady my shaking hands as I dialed the police. After several rings, a dispatcher answered. "I need help," I blurted out. "My niece is missing, and I think my brother-in-law is involved." The dispatcher asked a series of questions, her voice calm and measured. I struggled to provide clear details, the panic welling up inside me. "Please, you have to send someone right away," I pleaded. "I'm on my way to the station now." As I hung up the phone, a horrible thought occurred to me. What if Rick had already done something to Marley? My stomach churned at the possibility. I had to get there first, had to find her. Pulling into the police station, I raced inside, desperate to speak with someone who could help. The officer at the front desk eyed me warily as I described the situation. "We'll send a car over to check it out," he said, his tone dismissive. "In the meantime, I'll need you to file a missing persons report." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "A missing persons report? My niece is in danger and you want me to fill out paperwork?" "Ma'am, I understand you're concerned, but we have procedures to follow." He held up a hand. "An officer will be dispatched shortly. In the meantime, please have a seat and we'll get the report started." Frustration bubbled up inside me. How could they not see the urgency? I opened my mouth to argue, but a familiar face caught my eye. "Jamal!" I rushed over to the young journalist who was just leaving the station. "Thank goodness you're here. I need your help." Jamal's eyes widened as I recounted the chilling voicemail and Rick's threatening behavior. "This is big, Eileen," he said, his brow furrowed. "I'll do whatever I can to help." "Please, Jamal, You have to convince them to send someone to Rick's house right away, I pleaded. They don't seem to understand how serious this is. Jamal nodded, his expression determined. Leave it to me. He strode over to the front desk, his voice low and forceful. I watched anxiously as he spoke with the officer, gesturing emphatically. After a tense exchange, the officer finally relented, sending a patrol car to Rick's address. Jamal returned to me, his face grim. They're going to check it out, but Eileen, you need to be prepared for the worst. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I can't lose her, Jamal. Marley is all I have left. He placed a hand on my arm, his eyes filled with sympathy. I know, we'll find her, I promise. I nodded, my resolve hardening. I couldn't give in to despair, not when Marley needed me. I would do whatever it took to bring her home, even if it meant facing Rick again. As we waited for news from the officers, I felt a sense of dread settle over me. Rick had always kept his distance, but now I realized just how dangerous he truly was. The man I'd once considered family was willing to harm his own flesh and blood. The thought of Marley in his clutches was enough to make my blood boil. I clenched my fists, determined to see this through. Whatever happened, I would make him pay. As Jamal and I waited anxiously for news from the officers at Rick's house, my mind raced with a million questions. Where was Marley? What was Rick capable of? And why had he targeted his own niece? The minutes ticked by agonizingly slow, the silence punctuated only by the occasional crackle of the police radio. I fidgeted in my seat, my hands trembling. I needed to do something, anything, to help find Marley. Finally, the officers returned, their expressions grim. We found signs of a struggle in Marley's room, but no sign of her or your brother-in-law, one of them reported. We'll put out an APB and continue the investigation. I felt my heart sink. That's it? You're not going to do more? I demanded, my voice laced with desperation. The officer shook his head. I'm sorry, ma'am, but without more evidence, our hands are tied. We'll keep you posted, but in the meantime, you should go home and try to relax. Relax? How could I possibly relax when my niece was missing? I opened my mouth to protest, but Jamal placed a hand on my arm, his eyes pleading with me to stay calm. Thank you, officers, he said smoothly. We appreciate you looking into this. If there's anything else we can do to assist, please let us know. As the officers left, I turned to Jamal, my frustration boiling over. How can they just leave it at that? Marley could be in terrible danger, and they're treating it like a routine missing persons case. Jamal sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know, Eileen, but you have to understand. The police have their procedures, and without more evidence, their hands are tied. We'll have to take matters into our own hands. I stared at him, my brow furrowed. What do you mean? I mean, we need to dig deeper, he said, his voice low. Talk to Marley's friends, see if we can uncover anything the police might have missed. There has to be more to this story than meets the eye. I nodded, my determination renewed. Then let's get started. I won't rest until we find Marley and make Rick pay for what he's done. We headed to the university where Marley had been living with Rick. As we approached her dorm, a group of her friends huddled together, their faces etched with concern. Eileen, we heard what happened, one of them, a girl named Lily, said, rushing over to me. Is Marley okay? I shook my head, my heart aching. I don't know. The police haven't been able to find her. Lily's eyes widened and she exchanged a troubled glance with the others. That's not surprising, she murmured. What do you mean? Jamal asked, leaning in. Lily hesitated, then sighed. Marley's been having issues with Rick for a while now. He's been controlling and manipulative, and she's been trying to get away from him. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. What kind of issues? Financial, mostly, Lily explained. Rick's been exploiting Marley's inheritance, and when she tried to confront him about it, he got angry. That's why she moved out to get away from him. My blood boiled. So Rick had been using Marley for his own gain, even going so far as to cut her off. No wonder she was scared. Do you know anything else? Jamal pressed. Anything that could help us find her? Lily hesitated, then glanced around nervously. Well, there were rumors that Rick was involved in some shady business deals. Marley was trying to gather evidence, but then she disappeared. I felt a surge of hope. If Marley had been onto something, maybe there was a chance she was still alive. We need to find that evidence, I said, my voice firm. Can you help us? Lily nodded, her expression resolute. Absolutely. Marley's like a sister to us, and we'll do whatever it takes to bring her home. As we set out to uncover the truth, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were playing a dangerous game. But for Marley, I was willing to risk it all. As Jamal and I pored over the information gathered from Marley's friends, a sense of unease settled over me. The more we uncovered about Rick's shady business dealings, the more it became clear that he was a far more dangerous adversary than I had ever imagined. "This is heavy stuff, Eileen," Jamal murmured, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Money laundering, embezzlement, fraud. It looks like Rick has been running a pretty sophisticated criminal operation." I felt a chill run down my spine. And Marley was trying to expose him? The thought of my sweet, brave niece going up against such a ruthless man sent a wave of fear through me. Jamal nodded grimly. From the sounds of it, she was getting dangerously close to uncovering the truth. That's probably why Rick decided to silence her. I swallowed hard, my hands clenching into fists. "We have to find her, Jamal. We have to stop him before it's too late." "I know, Eileen," Jamal said, his voice laced with empathy. "But we're going to need help, the kind of help that can stand up to a guy like Rick." I frowned, my mind racing. "What are you suggesting?" "I have a contact at the local newspaper," Jamal explained. "A seasoned investigative reporter who's been looking into Rick's shady dealings for a while now. I think it's time we brought him in on this." I hesitated, my instinct to keep this close to my chest warring with the desperate need to find Marley. "Are you sure we can trust him?" Jamal gave me a reassuring nod. "I've worked with him before, Eileen. He's a straight shooter, and he'll do whatever it takes to expose the truth." I sighed, knowing we were running out of options. "All right, let's do it. The police don't seem to be taking this seriously, and we need all the help we can get." Jamal made the call, and within an hour, a grizzled, no-nonsense journalist named Jack joined us at the diner where we had been holed up. "So you think this Rick character is behind your niece's disappearance, huh?" Jack said, leaning back in his chair and eyeing us with a discerning gaze. "We do," I replied, my voice trembling with emotion. "He's been exploiting Marley's inheritance and trying to silence her. The police aren't doing enough, and we need your help to find her and bring him down." Jack stroked his chin, his eyes narrowing. "This is a dangerous game you're playing, kid. Rick's got some powerful friends in this town, and he's not the kind of guy you want to cross." I felt a flash of defiance. "I don't care how powerful he is. Marley is all I have left, and I'm not going to let him hurt her." Jack studied me for a long moment, then a wry grin spread across his face. "Well, ain't that just the most determined look I ever did see? All right, count me in. Let's see what we can dig up on this son of a bitch." As we pored over the information Jamal and I had gathered, Jack's expression grew increasingly grim. "This is worse than I thought," he muttered, shaking his head. "Rick's got his fingers in a lot of pies, and he's not afraid to get his hands dirty to keep his empire intact." I felt a surge of dread. "What are we up against, exactly?" Jack met my gaze, his eyes hardening. "A whole lot of trouble, kid. But don't worry, we're going to bring this bastard down, no matter what it takes." I nodded, my resolve steeling. For Marley, I would do whatever it took, even if it meant going to war with a man who had the power to crush us all. As Jack, Jamal, and I pored over the mountain of evidence against Rick, a growing sense of dread settled in the pit of my stomach. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that we were up against a truly formidable and ruthless adversary. "This guy's got his hands in everything," Jack muttered, shaking his head in disgust. "Money laundering, mortgage fraud, even some suspected ties to organized crime. It's a wonder he's managed to stay under the radar for this long." I felt my heart racing, the thought of Marley trapped in the clutches of such a dangerous man sending a chill down my spine. "We have to find her, Jack. We have to stop him before it's too late." Jack met my gaze, his eyes hardening. "I know, Eileen, but going up against a guy like Rick ain't going to be easy. He's got influence in this town, and he's not afraid to use it." Jamal leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The key is to hit him where it hurts the most, his reputation. If we can expose his criminal activities and bring them to light, it might be enough to force the authorities to take action." I nodded, a glimmer of hope igniting within me. "So what's the plan?" Jack stroked his chin, a wry grin spreading across his face. "Well, kid, I reckon we're going to have to get a little creative, and we're going to need to time this just right." Over the next few days, we worked tirelessly, compiling evidence and building a case against Rick. Jamal used his connections to gather information from Marley's friends and other sources, while Jack pulled strings and called in favors to uncover the depths of Rick's criminal activities. As the pieces started to fall into place, I felt a growing sense of determination. We were going to bring this bastard down no matter what it took. The opportunity presented itself sooner than we had anticipated. Rick was scheduled to speak at a high-profile charity event, one attended by the city's elite and influential. It was the perfect stage to expose his crimes. As the event unfolded, I watched from the sidelines, my heart pounding. Jamal had managed to secure us a spot on the guest list, and we were ready to strike. When Rick took the stage, his usual charming demeanor in place, I felt a surge of rage. How dare he stand there, basking in the adoration of the crowd, when he had caused so much pain and suffering? With a nod from Jack, I stepped forward, my voice ringing out across the room. Everyone, please listen. Rick Anderson is not the upstanding citizen you think he is. He's a criminal, a thief, and a liar. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs, and Rick's face contorted with rage. What is the meaning of this? He snarled, his eyes fixed on me. I refused to back down, my own fury fueling me. Rick has been embezzling funds, defrauding investors, and even exploiting his own family. And now he's responsible for the disappearance of my niece, Marley. The room exploded into pandemonium, people shouting and scrambling to get a better look. Rick's face turned a deep shade of crimson, and for a moment I caught a glimpse of the true monster lurking beneath his carefully crafted facade. "You bitch!" he spat, lunging towards me. But before he could reach me, a pair of burly security guards grabbed him, holding him back. "This woman is lying," Rick shouted, his composure crumbling. "I'm a respected member of this community, and I won't stand for these vicious slanders." I watched, my heart pounding, as the security guards wrestled a thrashing Rick out of the room. The crowd erupted into a frenzied din, and I knew that the time had come to finally expose the truth. As the chaos unfolded around me, I felt a surge of hope. We were one step closer to finding Marley and bringing Rick to justice. Whatever happened next, I was ready to face it, no matter the cost. The aftermath of my public confrontation with Rick was a whirlwind of chaos and confusion. As the security guards dragged him away, the crowd erupted into a frenzy of shouts and whispers, all eyes trained on me. I stood there, my heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had finally done it. I had exposed Rick for the monster he truly was. But even as the realization sank in, a sense of unease crept up my spine. What had I unleashed? Jamal and Jack were immediately at my side, their expressions tense. "That was risky, Eileen," Jack murmured, his brow furrowed, "but it seems to have worked." I nodded, my gaze fixed on the exit where Rick had been dragged. "I had to do it, Jack. For Marley." Jamal placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "We know, Eileen, and now the authorities can't ignore this. They'll have to investigate." I prayed he was right. After all, we had amassed a mountain of evidence against Rick. Surely the authorities would have no choice but to take action now. But as the minutes ticked by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Where were the police? Why wasn't anyone following up on my accusations? Anxiety gnawed at me, and I turned to Jamal, my voice barely a whisper. "Why isn't anyone doing anything?" Jamal's expression darkened. "I don't know, Eileen, but I have a bad feeling about this." Before he could say more, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd, a sinister grin plastered across his face. Well, if it isn't my dear sister-in-law, Eileen." I felt my blood run cold as Rick sauntered towards us, his eyes glinting with malice. "What's the matter, Eileen?" he taunted, his voice dripping with false concern. "Didn't you think I'd be prepared for your little stunt?" Jamal stepped forward, his body tense. "What are you talking about, Rick?" Rick chuckled, the sound sending a shiver down my spine. "Oh, Jamal, my boy, you should know by now that I have friends in high places. The police aren't coming. In fact, they've been instructed to stand down." I stared at him, horror dawning on me. "You can't be serious." Rick's grin widened. "Oh, but I am, Eileen. You see, I don't take kindly to people trying to ruin my life. And now, thanks to your little outburst, I'm going to make sure you and your little journalist friend pay the price." Before I could react, Rick's hand shot out, gripping my arm in a vice-like hold. I cried out, trying to pull away, but his grip was too strong. "Let her go, Rick," Jamal shouted, his voice laced with fury. Rick laughed, the sound echoing through the stunned silence of the crowd. "I don't think so, Jamal. You see, Eileen and I have some unfinished business to attend to." With a sudden jerk, he dragged me away, his grip tightening as I struggled against him. I could hear Jamal's desperate cries fading into the distance as Rick hauled me towards the exit, a twisted smile on his face. "Time to finish what we started, Eileen." I felt a surge of terror as the realization hit me. I had pushed Rick too far, and now I was paying the price. But I refused to give in, not when Marley was still out there, depending on me. As Rick shoved me into a waiting car, I knew that I had to find a way to escape, no matter the cost. I had come too far to give up now. Marley was counting on me, and I wouldn't let her down. As Rick shoved me into the back of the car, panic surged through me. My mind raced, searching for a way to escape, but the thug he had brought with him loomed over me, his expression menacing. "Where are you taking me?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Rick's twisted grin sent a chill down my spine. "That's for me to know and you to find out, Eileen." I opened my mouth to protest, but before I could speak, the car lurched forward, leaving the chaos of the charity event behind. I gripped the seat, my knuckles turning white as I stared out the window, wondering what horrors awaited me. Where was Marley? Was she even still alive? The thought of my sweet niece in the hands of this monster filled me with a sickening dread. After what felt like an eternity, the car pulled to a stop in a secluded industrial area. Rick and his henchmen dragged me from the vehicle, and I stumbled, my legs shaking from the ordeal. "Welcome to my little hideaway, Eileen," Rick said, his voice dripping with malice. "I hope you're comfortable, because you're going to be staying for a while." I glared at him, refusing to show my fear. "What have you done to Marley?" Rick's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I saw a flash of something that might have been guilt. "Marley is safe for now. As long as you cooperate, that is." I felt a surge of relief, but it was quickly replaced by a renewed determination. "Let her go, Rick. This is between you and me." He laughed, the sound hollow and menacing. "Oh, Eileen, you really don't understand, do you? Marley is the key to everything. I'm not about to let her go, not when she's the only thing keeping me from losing it all." I felt bile rise in my throat as the realization dawned on me. "You're using her, just like you've been using everyone else." Rick's expression hardened. "You just don't get it, do you? This is all about survival. Marley's inheritance, my business dealings, it's all been about securing my future. And I'll be damned if I let some nosy nurse and her little reporter friend ruin it all." I opened my mouth to speak, but the sound of a door slamming cut me off. To my relief and horror, Marley was being shoved into the room, her eyes wide with fear. "Aunt Eileen!" she cried, rushing towards me. I pulled her into my arms, my heart pounding. "Marley, thank God you're all right." Rick watched the reunion with a twisted smile. "How touching. But don't get too comfortable, because we've got some unfinished business to take care of." Marley's grip on me tightened, and I could feel her trembling. "What do you want from us, Rick?" He chuckled, the sound sending a shiver down my spine. "What I want, my dear, is to ensure my future, and that means I can't have you or your aunt interfering with my plans anymore." I felt a surge of panic, my protective instincts kicking in. "You can't do this, Rick. The police are already onto you, and the world knows what you've done." Rick's expression darkened, and in that moment I saw the true monster that lurked beneath his charming facade. "The police? Oh, Eileen, you really are a fool. I told you I have friends in high places, and as for the world, well, let's just say that I have a few tricks up my sleeve." He gestured to his henchman, who moved towards us, a syringe in hand. I tensed, my mind racing, but before I could react, the man lunged forward, plunging the needle into my arm. As the world began to spin, I heard Marley's anguished cries and Rick's laughter echoing in my ears. Then, everything went black. I awoke with a pounding headache, my limbs heavy and my mind hazy. As my senses slowly returned, I realized I was lying on a cold, hard surface, my hands and feet bound. Panic surged through me as the memories of what had happened came flooding back. Marley, Rick, the syringe. "Marley!" I cried out, my voice hoarse. A familiar voice answered, laced with relief. "Aunt Eileen, you're awake." I turned my head to see Marley sitting beside me, her eyes shining with tears. "Are you all right?" I asked, my heart pounding. She nodded, her expression tense. "I'm okay, but Rick..." Her voice trailed off, and I felt a fresh wave of fear wash over me. "Where is he?" I asked, struggling against my bonds. "Right here, Eileen," a chilling voice replied. I looked up to see Rick standing over us, a twisted grin on his face. "Glad to see you're finally joining us. What do you want from us, Rick?" I spat, my anger bubbling to the surface. He chuckled, the sound sending a chill down my spine. "What I want, my dear Eileen, is to ensure my future, and that means getting rid of you and your meddlesome niece once and for all." Marley let out a muffled sob, and I felt a surge of protectiveness. "You won't get away with this, Rick. The police are on to you, and the whole world knows what you've done." Rick's expression darkened, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the true monster that lurked beneath his charming facade. "The police?" he scoffed. "Didn't I tell you, Eileen? I have friends in high places. They're not coming to save you." I felt a chill run down my spine, but I refused to back down. "Then we'll expose you ourselves. The truth will come out, Rick. And when it does, you'll be the one paying the price." He laughed, the sound hollow and menacing. "Oh, Eileen, you really are a fool. The truth? What makes you think anyone will believe you? After all, you're just a bitter old nurse with a grudge against her brother-in-law." Rage bubbled up inside me, and I strained against my bonds. "You're a monster, Rick, and you'll pay for what you've done." He shrugged, his expression indifferent. "Maybe, but not today." He turned to his henchmen, who had been lurking in the shadows. "Take care of them." The man stepped forward, a sinister glint in his eyes, and I felt a surge of panic. This was it. This was the end. But just as the henchman raised his weapon, the sound of sirens pierced the air. Rick's eyes widened, and he cursed under his breath. "What's going on?" he demanded, his voice laced with panic. The henchman hesitated, his expression uncertain. "I don't know, boss, but it sounds like trouble." Suddenly, the door burst open, and a team of police officers flooded the room, their guns drawn. Rick's face contorted with rage as they swarmed around him, cuffing him and dragging him away. "No!" he screamed, his voice hoarse with desperation. "This isn't over." I watched, dumbfounded, as the chaos unfolded around me. How had the police known to come, and where had they come from? Marley's hand found mine, and I squeezed it tightly, relief flooding through me. "It's over, Aunt Eileen," she whispered, her voice shaking. "It's finally over." As the officers untied us and led us to safety, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Justice had been served, and Marley was safe. But the cost had been high, and I knew that the healing process would be a long and difficult one. Still, as I looked at Marley's face, battered but unbroken, I knew that we would get through this. Together, we would rebuild our lives and move forward, stronger and more resilient than ever before. For now, the darkness had been vanquished, and the light of hope shone brightly once more.